Hi there. I'm going to try to encapsulate this in 10 to 15 minutes. As they tell me at work, hey, just land the plane. And we're going to go through some of the post-stroke recovery elements again. Right? For those that had a stroke under 50, it's going to be pretty fucking terrible. Right? Best noun adjective combination I have at this moment. Now, first reason is we're going to go through the altered sense of self again, and I'm going to give it, 10 to 15 minutes, and I'm going to revisit some of that 30-minute video yesterday, break it down into smaller chunks, right? So, altered sense of self, that is predominantly going to be one of your biggest hurdles, right? That's the obstacle that you're going to have to get her over first. Right. So with altered sense of self, there comes many facets to it. Because stroke, only about 10% of the people that have stroke or have a stroke would be under 50, right? 50 or under. So again, it's largely a disease of old people, right? So if you're not old, why did I have my stroke? And I got many good years ahead of me, and all that goes with that. So basically, with the loss of self, the altered sense of self, it's because you've had a chronic illness, right? Or you're suffering through the acute phase of your chronic illness. Once you had a stroke, you're on medication for the rest of your life. And because of that, right, during the recovery phase, right, your life might be slightly restricted. You may be socially isolated. You might feel a little bit discredited. You might feel like you're a burden to others. Well, if I could get the check mark going, ding, 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 all four, right? My life right now is a bit restricted. I do not have the same capabilities sometimes as I used to. Socially isolated? Oh yeah, totally. I'm there. Feel discredited? Yeah, I had my stroke at work in front of about 150 to 200 people. Feel like a burden? Yeah, I do. It's true. Right? Have there been good things come out of the stroke? Yeah, completely. There have been a few good things come out of the stroke. My brother and I, we are, mending fences, so to speak, rebuilding a relationship that dwindled. Not anyone's fault in specific. If it's anyone's fault, probably more mine, because I was the guy that had the depression. So that's helpful. Also, the stroke has been the ultimate asshole detector. I have learned who the driftwood is, and I'm not collecting driftwood. So if you're a driftwood person, you're done. I'm going to get rid of you, right? I don't need driftwood, right? So, so the problem with your altered sense of self being the first hurdle you have to get over is, one, you just have to accept the fact you've had a stroke, right? With that altered sense of self, right? You've got a lot going on there, right? Right. So with altered sense of self, right, you now have just one, you don't want to be perceived as disabled, right? You don't want to be perceived as a burden. You don't want to be perceived as incapable, incompetent, unable to compete, unable to meaningfully and gainfully hold a job, not able to go to your work and be able to be constructive and creative and be an actual contributing member of the team, right? So that's the first piece, because now I'm in that acute, first 3 months of my recovery, right? You also have that need to be involved in pre-stroke activities as much as possible. You may have severe limitations, if not, an inability to do certain things, or the limitations are ones you're willing to accept, right? You're not willing to accept the fact that you can't play piano, or you can't knit, or you used to be able to enjoy crosswords and you can't do them anymore because of language problems, or you're too twitchy and you can't put pen and paper without it looking like some kind of abstract artwork. So with the altered sense of self, the primary factor there from the research I've done would be how you perceived yourself before the stroke. What was your role before the stroke? How did you fulfill that role before the stroke? How many different roles did you have before the stroke? Were you a spouse, parent, worker, leader? Were you involved in your community? Were you a hockey player? Did you do, were you a musician? Like, how many different roles, how many different hats in your life did you wear? And then, not only that, what about, so you've got your family and home workspace, you've got your work workspace, then you have your social workspace, right? In every workspace, you may not be able to contribute the way you would like to, right? Now, again, with altered sense of self comes that loss of identity, right? With that loss of identity also becomes the, where is it? So like with the loss of identity also becomes this changing in roles. So with your altered sense of self, that will change over time, at least hopefully, right? Because as your recovery advances over time, hopefully your limitations become fewer. And if the limitations don't become fewer, your ability to improvise, adapt, and overcome gets greater, right? Hopefully, right? Now, for those that are still in hospital and you happen to be watching this, you're in a rehab facility, a recovery facility, I appreciate you are now suffering through a huge sense of an altered sense of self, because that's not your life, that's your existence right now. Your life is not in that hospital room, right? Where you exist right now is in that hospital room, and I know you're chomping to get out. Right? Your identity is not in that room or in your rehab activities. Right? Your identity is outside of that building. I get that, right? So, and I realize that not being in your own bed, in your own home, I get how demoralizing and debilitating that can be, right? Even being in your own bed sometimes isn't the greatest thing, especially when you haven't been out of your bed for almost 26 hours, right? Because that's where your body's being told it needs to be by your brain, right? Now, with that loss of the sense of who you are, right, that rolls directly, your loss of sense of self rolls directly into your loss of identity, right? Now, you inadvertently identify as the stroke person, right? You're the guy that had the stroke. I know when I go back to work, I'm probably going to, hey, you're that guy that had the stroke. I'm like, yep, that was me, right? Because I know by the time I get back, there's going to be a whole host of employees that I've never met. So, and then you're going to get that whole, why me thing. Like, why did I have a stroke? Um, did did you smoke or not? Were you a drunkard or not? Were you abusing drugs or not? Were you, 9,000 pounds or not? Were you a diabetic or not? Were you on birth control or some other medication that has a very good incident of providing you a stroke, right? So there's many reasons why you may or may not have had your stroke, but you're going to go through that kind of why me. Um, okay? And now with loss of identity, also becomes, you know, the sense like a part of you's been stolen, right? I was robbed of fill in the blank because of my stroke. Um, Also in that initial, right now I'm going to say 3 months because that's the period I'm in. You're going to feel like you're grieving, right? And I'll admit I'm kind of there. Nah, no, fuck it, I'm there. I'm totally there. And that's why I encourage anyone that's had a stroke, you need to go and seek some kind of counseling, right? You're going to have a sense of bereavement, right? Because there's things that you used to be able to do, and you're angry that you can't do it, right? You're sad you can't do it. You're wishing you could do it. You're like bargaining with yourself. Hey, if you could just get through this, we'll go for ice cream, or I promise I'll take a nap, right? For some people with the altered sense of self, right, you're gonna go right back to basics. You may have to learn how to walk again, talk again, read again, write again, comb your hair, do buttons. I put on shoes last night that had laces for the first time in a month, if not since my stroke. It took some swearing, but I got them on. I figured, you know what, I'm going to go out and I'm going to dress like an adult tonight, and I'm going to put on shoes that have laces. It took forever. But with relearning how to integrate yourself and relate to your world, right? You're gonna feel like a kid again. So again, now you get back to that loss of identity, loss of sense of self, right? And then the last one again is family disruption and role change. And I'm gonna even say that could be doesn't have to be limited to family disruption. That could be workplace disruption. That could be social disruption. That could be, your life is going to be disrupted in many ways, both at home, socially, and on the job. And if you have any other functions that you participate in, your social disruption could be broken down by activity. So you now have to accept the fact that your role in a certain group of people, be it at home, at work, in social activities, is going to change. It has to. You cannot be the same individual during your recovery, right, and possibly for a bit of longevity after your stroke, right? That is going to disrupt your family, your workplace, and your social activities, your leisure activities, your sporting activities, right? It's going to impact how you interact with that group. And I realize that part of our sense of self, part of our identity is in those groups, right? So, and I can only appreciate that, if you can never really pick up your child again when they're younger, right? How mentally and psychologically devastating that would be. I can't even imagine, right? So, just imagine that all of these things are going to disrupt. And I'm going to do a video just on social, family, employment disruption and role change. I'm going to do a video just on that because we're creeping up on 15 minutes. But that being said, we've covered like your loss of identity, right? Your sense of loss of identity. We've covered your altered sense of self, right? And I'm going to do another video just on the family disruption and role change. So if you happen to notice either in yourself or someone around you the signs or symptoms of a stroke, that being facial droop, inability to raise both arms equally or effectively or at all, inability to smile equally effectively or at all, slurred, stuttering speech, inappropriate word usage for situation or context, inability to stand unaided, general body weakness or weakness in one side, please immediately place that person in a position of comfort and dial 911. Something so simple could save a life. Oh, and if you happen to like what you've been watching over the last, 2 and a bit months, or you know someone that's going through the throes of a stroke, or a family member that's going through the throes of supporting someone of a stroke, please like, share, subscribe, and share this with your friends.